Oh, okay. So we will get started. Let's turn the sound off so you guys can hear me talking. Choose a design. All right. Now, this is the kind of question it's going to make me shake you guys. Can somebody speak up and tell me the words that are in this title that indicate that this is phenomenology?
Lived experience.
The lived experience. The lived experience. The lived experience. I think I said this 100 times when I was lecturing the other day for qualitative. If you see those words, that's phenomenology. Excellent. An expert opinion is not research. It's just an expert opinion. So it's at the very, very bottom of the scale. Okay? Systematic review is generally towards the top. RCTs is way at the top. Cohort studies are in between. But an expert opinion is not based, it's not a study itself. So it's always at the bottom. Man, I wish I'd come up with some cooler music. Okay. So, the blue one, descriptive. We have descriptive statistics.
Get off the bed.
But there's really not a descriptive quantitative study, so to speak. We use quantitative studies sometimes to describe in a way, but that's not really a study design. Phenomenology is never going to be the answer because we don't test variables with qualitative research. Can anybody tell the group what the difference is, the key difference between correlational and t-test?
I think it's that t-tests look at two separate values, while correlation look at how they're related to each other.
Close. I mean, I think you're thinking along the same lines.
T-tests determine the significance of the values, where correlational would just be, does this relate to that?
It does use significance, though, as in the sense of significance is a hard word to use in statistics unless you're meaning like p-value. I think I get what you're saying. Correlational, it does have to be statistically significant, but correlational looks at the relationships. Are two things related or not? Are they positively related? Are they negatively related? Are they related at all? T-test doesn't look at the relationship. It looks at the differences. Okay? And Jordan, you said independent. That's sort of, you're not necessarily looking at two totally different things. you might be looking at scores before and scores after. Where correlational might be looking at whether or not the numbers of hours you studied relate to what your score is. So that's the big difference. If we say we're looking at the relationship and whether or not two things are connected or correlated, that's correlational. If we're looking at differences, we're looking at t-tests. There are multiple of these on the exam, at least 2, maybe 3. Okay. The dependent variable is dependent on the independent variable. So what is the overall outcome that we're looking at? We're looking at whether or not the adult is losing more weight. Okay? So that makes it the dependent variable. Somebody's unmuted. Can you mute, please? I can't see who it is. I get distracted easy. So this one's written a little bit confusing, and there's nothing, this isn't a PICO, this is a hypothesis. So it doesn't have to be written in a certain format. Adults is our population. If they eat 30% less meat, that's what we're intervening. That's our manipulation. We're having the people eat 30% less meat to see if they lose weight. Okay, so the weight loss is or is not dependent on whether or not they eat 30% less meat. Yeah, the independent variable, well, it's not the meat itself, it's eating 30% less meat. So if I had meat and 30% less meat, just make sure that you're choosing the right one. So your dependent is what the overall thing is that you're looking at. Guys, I'm trying to see your chat, but it's over here. So if you have a question and I don't answer, just say something to me. The independent is what we manipulate, if anything gets manipulated. Oh my gosh, you guys are across the board on this. Okay, this is a problem because this type of hypothesis, I think, is on there. There's a bunch of hypothesis questions. There's questions about independent versus dependent variables. There's questions about what type of hypothesis it is. So y'all have got to figure out hypotheses or you're going to miss a lot of questions. So this does not give a direction, okay? We know that. We can take that out right away. It's not directional at all because it's saying it does not affect how much food it eats. Meaning, if it says that if we said the size of a dog impacts how much food it eats, that is saying that there is a relationship, okay? So that would mean it's not null. It would actually be non-directional because it tells us that it does impact it, but it doesn't tell us in which direction or how much. This one doesn't tell us either of those things. It doesn't tell us that it is related in any way, shape, or form. It says there is no relationship. The size does not affect how much food. There is no relationship between those two things. That is the null. That means there is no relationship. So we got to figure these ones out, guys, or we're going to to miss. You're going to miss lots of questions. Okay, so Duck's recording it. He can share it, and I will share the Kahoots, absolutely, once class is over. I'll put it in the announcements. Okay, so next one. Independent variables. There are multiple of these. No, 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 Maria, please don't do that. I'll share the link, but please don't type the questions and answers. Those are almost like tests. They take me a really, really long time to put together, and then it just makes it too easy for something to accidentally get into the next group's hands, and then I don't have anything to teach them with because they've already seen it. So please don't do that. How'd you guys do? Okay, we're still across the board a little bit. Pediatric patients, those are our population. Parental presence is not relevant because we're not talking about, we didn't say pediatric patients are more likely to cry if a parent is present. I didn't say that. I said specifically that the mom is present. Okay? So the presence of the mom is my independent variable. My dependent variable is, are they more likely to cry? So when you're reading these, you have to ask yourself, what am I looking at? I am looking at, if mom is there, are these kids crying more? That's my outcome. Okay? So mom being there versus not being there, if this was a PICO, is the independent variable. And crying, how much they cry, or whether or not they're more likely to cry, is the dependent variable. Okay? There's something, oh, so you could also be, you know, if mom is there versus is dad there. But we're looking specifically at mom. So that's why it's not parental presence. It's specific to mom. And let me tell you, as a nurse and as a parent, a lot of times they do cry more, especially with mothers, because mothers tend to baby a little bit more. I do it too, and allow them, you know, we don't say anything when they cry. Okay, we're getting closer. Are we saying that there is a relationship? Yes. We're saying that college students who binge drink are going to have lower med-surg scores. So blue is definitely not the answer, because we are saying that there is a relationship. Are we saying the direction of that relationship? Yes. We're saying if you binge drink, your scores are going to go down. So it is directional. So you're kind of looking for, one thing you'd be looking for is the word increase, or higher, or lower, or less, or more. Okay, this one, you have a little bit longer. Six seconds. Okay, I think on some of them, I tried to change it to like 45 and 60 seconds to give you longer to answer. So sorry about that one. So let's look. The question is there a significant correlation or relationship between social functioning and Wexel IQ test scores? Okay. Now this one, you might see ones like this that do not have the p-value, or they do not have the 0.0 whatever. They don't have the alpha specifically listed in the table. They do have it. It's down here. Can you guys see my cursor?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So you can see what the correlation is down here. Sometimes it'll be in the table. Sometimes it won't be. Correlation, if it has 2 asterisks, it's significant. It's the 99% confidence interval. If it's 1 asterisk, it's 95%. So we're looking at the social functioning. So that's the one you're going to look at first, which is down here, 4. And we're going to compare it to the Wexel IQ test score. Well, how do we know? Because there's no words up here. Well, Wexel is number 1. So that's number 1. So social functioning test score and the Wexel IQ would come down here to negative 0.077. There's no asterisks beside this at all. This number that's right here, this 0.077, that's not a p-value. That is a Pearson correlation. That's an R value. Sometimes it'll say R. Sometimes it'll say R up here. Other times it just says up at the top, Pearson correlation. Okay, so there are no asterisks. So for the purpose of this one, there is no significance. Okay. There is no math. Only people who are crazy into math do statistics by hand, and other people use statistical programs. I am never going to ask you guys to calculate a p-value by hand, ever. I don't even know how to calculate a p-value by hand. So, yeah, no, they're going to be given to you. You just have to be able to read the table. You're going to see different types of tables. Here's another one. Is well-being associated with social functioning? Sorry, trying to make it bigger there for you. Oops. These aren't so easy to view on here. Apologize for that. It'll be easier on the exam, obviously. So let's look at our media. General well-being and social functioning. General well-being is down here. Social functioning is number 4. So 5, they spelled general wrong. Over to 4. It is correlated at 0.333. And there looks like it's 2 asterisks. There's at least 1 there. So is it associated with it? Yep. Is it positively associated? Yep. There's no negative there. Is it statistically significant? Yes, at least it's something, because I can see an asterisk there. So yes, it is. And yes, it is statistically significant. Guys, there are probably 4 or 5 of these on the exam. And the tables are all slightly different. Now, I might also do it this way and give you just the question and the answer right there in it instead of the table. All right. Okay, I'm going to say something, and I'm not trying to be mean. If you guys are missing these, you need to reach out to me. Email me, message me on Teams, something. You are not going to do well on this exam if you are missing these statistically significant questions, okay? If you're struggling with it, it's okay. I don't expect you to know all this, but you have to tell me. This is significant because, remember what I said, I didn't tell you here what the alpha was set at. If I don't explicitly tell you that it was set at something, assume that it was set at 0.05, because that is the case, and that is what it's going to be in most cases in the real world, is it's going to be at 0.05, unless somebody tells you that it is 0.01, okay? I didn't tell you that in this question, so it's 0.05. Is this p-value less than 0.05? Yes, it's 0.02. So yes, it is statistically significant.
If you set the p to less than 0.01, will you have some? How will you word that?
You can't set it less than 0.01 because that's 99%.
Okay.
You mean, will I set it less than 0.05?
Yes.
I would say alpha is 0.01.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Next. I really, really, really want you guys to do well on this exam. I want to see some amazing scores. You all had better get this after question number 1. I will have to jump through the screen and do some shaking if not. And why again is this phenomenology?
Lived experiences.
Write it down, tattoo it on your arm. Lived experiences, phenomenology. It's nothing else. I actually just had this conversation today about a study we're planning, and somebody put in a question or something about lived experience, and I said, nope, that's not going to work, because then they're going to expect phenomenology, and we're not doing a phenomenological study. Connect those two things. I guarantee you there's going to be at least one question on that. Study of the processes that occur after victims of a traumatic experience return to work. Hint, hint, it's not phenomenology because it doesn't say lived experience. It does not say lived experience. It is not phenomenology. Study of the processes, I think this is on the study guide, the psychosocial processes or the processes or the social processes or whatever kind of processes is grounded theory. Okay, when I talked about my study, my dissertation study, I studied the psychosocial processes. That is grounded theory. It's always grounded theory, at least for the purposes of my class. Retired professor of culture on a study of the health practices of the Amish. Hold on a second. Is this an insider's view or an outsider's view?
Outsiders.
Yep. This person is probably really smart and probably knows all kinds of things about this. But unless it says that he's a retired Amish professor or that he's a retired professor who's also Amish, he's an outsider. Out has a T in it. Emic does not have a T in it. Etic has a T in it. So outsider is etic. Okay. Ethnographic, that's not really a perspective. It's an ethnographic study, but it's not a, that's not what I was looking for here. Emic and etic are the two perspectives that we're looking for. If I asked what kind of study it was, then yes, it would be an ethnographic study. For doing an experiment, good. This wasn't something that will be on the test, and I didn't specifically cover this. I did last year. But if we're doing an experiment versus a quasi-experiment, the difference is that the experiment, there's going to be randomization, and this says no randomization. So I'm good. You guys did really well on it. I'm glad you got it. Okay, there must be some confusion. Nominal is not numerical, okay? Completely different words. Numerical means numbers. With nominal data, there are no numbers. Nominal is names, okay? It's words. So blue is not going to be right here. Weight is a number, and it's not a number that's negative, and 0 means 0. A weight of 0 means 0. Also, 1 pound times 2 is 2 pounds. So double 1 pound is in fact 2 pounds, and double 2 pounds is in fact 4 pounds, and that's not always going to be the case with interval. So that's why it's ratio. And I think there are 4, 5, 6 slides on those scales of measurements. There are 2 or 3 questions on scales of measurements on that exam. All right, let's see who's the smarty pants. Parametric tests are used when the data is normally distributed. How am I going to know if the data is normally distributed?
Check to see if it has a bell curve.
There you go. Good job, Dylan. Yep, the normal curve or the bell curve. So if I slap out my data on a scale like that, on a histogram, and it doesn't flow like a bell, then it's not normally distributed. Okay, so I'm going to have to run non-parametric tests. So you may see on the test either it might be clearly delineated as a curve, it might be a histogram, maybe it'll have a line indicating the curve, maybe it won't. But you should be able to eyeball it and tell me whether or not it looks like a bell curve. I encourage you to go back and look at that little video clip that's in the PowerPoint. Remember, it was only like 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes long. There are also tons of other videos on bell curves. And familiarize yourself with, when you eyeball it, what should it look like? And if it doesn't look like that, and I ask you a question on the exam, you have an image, and I say, is this, what type of test are we going to run? You're going to need to be able to tell me non-parametric or parametric, depending on what it looks like, okay? I'm not going to ask you a basic question like this. I'm going to make you apply it. So if you know that it's based on the bell curve, then you should be able to get it right. If it's skewed to one side or the other, it's going to be a non-parametric test. The other important thing would be if I say, what type of test could we run? And you know that it has to be a non-parametric test because it's skewed. I don't expect you to know all of the details of all those non-parametric tests, but you need to know which ones are, at least which ones are parametric, which are t-test, correlational. So if you see, and ANOVA, so if you see those as the answers, am I going to run a t-test? The answer is going to be no, not unless the data is normally distributed. So that's the kind of thing I'm going to expect you to know. Take what you know and answer the question. I want you to be able to apply it, not just be able to answer a basic knowledge level question. This is going to be on the test. Is it a descriptive statistic or is it an inferential statistic? All right. Here's a quick way to answer this. Can I calculate a frequency in my head? Now, keep in mind, I'm not talking 20,000 respondents. I'm talking if I did a study of 100 people, can I determine the frequency of something in my head or with a basic calculator? Yes, I can. I can determine, if I had y'all turn on your cameras, what the frequency of brunettes are in this class. It'd take me a minute to see all of you, but I could figure that out pretty quickly. Can I do that with the mean? Yes, because it's an average. So I count all of you, whatever I'm looking at, and I divide by the number of you. That's the average. Can I do a probability in my head or on a basic calculator? Yep. Go back to that descriptive statistics slide. All of these are listed there. Frequency, mean, median, mode, range, and probability. And technically, because standard deviation is a range out from the mean, it is also a descriptive statistic. A correlation coefficient, that's an R value. Unless you got some serious math skills, you're not calculating that with a basic calculator and in your head. You're using SPSS or another statistical program to do that. That is an inferential statistic, because then I have to look at it and say, is it statistically significant? I don't have to do that with frequency, probability, and mean. So those are descriptive statistics. There will be at least one that asks you whether or not something is descriptive or inferential, but there will be multiple questions on multiple of those types of statistics. This you will see. All right. So I'm trying to break this down as basic as I can. Now, these, again, are really short kind of titles because I can't put big ones in here. You are going to see multiple of these where there are going to be actual real-life study titles, and I'm going to ask you which of the following is most likely to be qualitative, or I might say which of the ones most likely to be phenomenology, in which case, if you see the word lived experience, it's phenomenology. I might ask you, which of these is the highest level of evidence based on these study titles? Well, what kind of study is it? If it's qualitative and all the rest of them are quantitative, qualitative is always at the bottom. You can't rank qualitative. So I'm not going to give you multiple qualitative unless I give you 3 qualitative and an expert opinion, in which case the expert opinion is lower, but I'm not going to do that. When you are looking at moderators or effects of something, that's quantitative. You're measuring something. If I'm looking at the symptoms that occur, that's quantitative. If I'm looking at behaviors that are associated, well, that's probably a correlation. That's quantitative. Reports from former victims, which is probably experiences, that's qualitative. If you see reports, opinions, stories, reflections of, that's qualitative, okay? We do not quantify those types of things. I don't know why my throat always gets dry when I'm lecturing. Characteristics of qualitative studies. You might see one of these as a select all that apply. It's a good question, Sam. If you're saying strategies, like strategies used, stories from victims, well, if you're talking about the strategies and they're giving you ideas, then that would be qualitative. If they're testing the effectiveness of the strategy, then that's quantitative. This is a key for you guys. Write this down, record this, highlight this. You do not test anything with qualitative. If you are testing it, it absolutely has to be quantitative. Okay? You don't test something with words. Now, if I'm measuring your frustration on some numerical scale as a result of me saying words to you, then that would be quantitative. But if we're actually considering, or if we're actually testing things that are numeric, it has to be quantitative. Okay? I didn't realize that's what the question was. Okay, this is why. We don't use hypotheses in qualitative research. So qualitative and hypothesis does not go together at all. I talked about the researcher being an instrument. Absolutely, Reagan. You do not test anything if it's qualitative. If you're testing it, it is not qualitative. The researcher is an instrument. That's because you're going in and you're reading and you're having to pull out their meaning. Okay? So that is qualitative. You don't do that with quantitative. We use actual valid tools and instruments. Inductive approach is qualitative. If it's coming from the participant's perspective, the lived experience, or the processes that they went through, that is qualitative. So test, numbers, hypothesis, effects of, risk for, that is all quantitative. Okay? All of it. Guys did pretty good on this. So we talked about type 1 and type 2 errors, okay? Type 1 error is a false positive, all right? Type 2 error is saying that there's something going on, or saying that there's not something going on when there is. So go back to Understanding Stats PowerPoint. Let me see. It's in slides 24 and 25. You guys did pretty good on that. Proud of you. Those are tough ones. There will be at least one, maybe two on those, and there will be sensitivity and specificity questions. Probably two, at least. I already said this. I hope you were listening. alpha level, I said this earlier, it is most often set at 95%, which is a p-value of less than 0.05. Actually, it would say alpha is, this p wouldn't be here. Alpha is 0.05, meaning your p-value has to be less than 0.05 for it to be statistically significant. I'm not going to trick you on this test. If it does not indicate either on the table that you're looking at or somewhere in the question that the p-value is anything else, then you can assume that the alpha is set at 0.05. So anything less than 0.05 is going to be statistically significant. Otherwise, I might say, like Dylan asked, the alpha was set at 0.01. It's either going to be 0.05 or 0.01. I'm not, you know, the articles I told you I read, I'm not going to be in there giving you a p-value of 0.03 and telling you that's what it's set at. It's 0.05 or it's 0.01. If it's not stated, it's 0.05. Two left. Oh, with a very small sample. Yep. Type 2 error, that is saying that there's no difference when there actually is, but we don't get to see the effect of it because the effect size is small. And the reason that the effect size is small is because our sample is too small. So we do, what do we do to determine how big our sample size has to be? Yes. Good, Nick. Yes. Power analysis. So small sample equals type 2 error, which means it's just not strong enough for us to see that something is happening because we just didn't impact enough people. Okay? So, yeah. Small sample, type 2 error. How do we fix that, or how do we try to prevent that? We do a power analysis so we know exactly how many participants we have to have. Okay? Connect those three things. Small sample, power analysis, type 2 error. Last question. They're not going to generally be both. It has to be one or the other. Not saying that it couldn't be a type 1 with a small sample size, but that's not usually the case. But you can't have a type 1 and a type 2 error. That's some pretty ominous music we got going on there. That's why I gave you guys a little bit longer. So, high sensitivity. Remember your snout and spin? Go back to that slide 34. Know that slide. If the test is highly sensitive, remember what I said, our gold standard is for them to be high sensitivity and high specificity, but that does not happen very often, okay? And usually, if it's one, it's not good on the other. So usually it's going to be high sensitivity and low specificity, or it's going to be the opposite. It's not going to be, most of the time you're not going to have both one way or another. If it is highly sensitive, and that's what it is, when it is negative, it rules it out. Okay? So that means that you can trust the negative. So this one says few false negatives. All right? A true negative would mean that it's correct. And that's what we usually get with a highly sensitive test. So know your snout and your spin. If it's highly sensitive, when it's negative, it rules out. If it's highly specific, when it's positive, it rules in. All right. Let me stop sharing here. Can't ask me that question, Faith. There is no way for me to make this. I can't make, it's not going to be that basic on the exam. The reason that I can't make them more specific on the Kahoot is because it won't let me. It's like, my video is highlighted for everybody in the meeting. Oh my. So the reason that I can't make them that big like I would on the exam in Kahoot, it won't let me. It's like Twitter. So some of them, as far as like, if I give you a table, and I say, if I give you a table and I say, is something statistically significant, then yes, it's going to be. What I'm generally going to say is I'm going to show you a table and I'm going to ask you if, I might say, is it statistically significant? Or I might say, how is it correlated and is it statistically significant? So you're going to have to say, yeah, the answer might be yes, it's statistically significant at R equals 0.33. The key there is going to see, because it's not just going to be a table with two variables. These are going to be tables that come from research studies. So you're going to have multiple variables, and you're going to have to go to the correct two and determine what the answer is, and also determine the statistical significance. So that's the kind of thing I'm going to ask. So let me go through. You guys don't have to stay. That's all I have for the Kahoot. I'm going to go through this outline, and I'm going to try to give you a little bit of an idea. You know, Maggie, I'm going to try to go through some of these. I honestly just don't think that I have time because it takes too much time to write those questions. And I still have a few exam questions that I'm writing, and I can't be trying to come up with one versus trying to come up with the other. So let me try to give you some ideas while I'm reading through these, okay? So you guys did not do well on the types of PICO questions on the last exam. We gave you some of those points back because overall it was very poorly correct, but there weren't any other correct answers. So we gave you points back on something that you missed, most of you missed, even though there was no other option. But because you did so bad as a group, we felt like we had to give it back. So I'm like, they need to know this. You need to know the types of PICO questions. So there will be at least 2 questions. So you're going to have to go back. I think it's the chapter 2, the asking clinical questions, asking something, compelling clinical questions, and look at the types of PICO questions. If you're looking at the risk for development of, those are not intervention questions. Those are prognosis or etiology questions. Okay. A meaning question is something qualitative. That one should be super easy for you to pick out. If I'm talking about experiences, anything that you could see being qualitative, that's meaning. If I'm looking at the effectiveness is a VQ scan. This was something that was big when I was much younger in nursing. Is a VQ scan more effective than a venous ultrasound in detecting the presence of a blood clot? That is a diagnostic question, okay? So you guys have to know these. You have to understand what type of PICO you're writing as you move forward in doing an evidence-based practice project. So there's going to be at least 2 questions on types of PICOs. So go back and look at those. If you don't understand them, ask me. Levels of evidence, I'm not going in depth in that. You guys know the hierarchy. You're using the hierarchy I gave you before. And there may be 1 or 2 of either, probably going to be like study titles. I'm going to ask you which one is the highest or lowest level of evidence. And it's going to be in the title. I'm not going to try to confuse you. The answer is going to be there. It's either going to be a cohort study, a correlational study, and you have to know where they are. There'll probably be 2 of those on there too. Generating quantitative evidence. Trying to pull up those PowerPoints just to make sure I hit on everything and give you an idea of what type of question. Maggie, if I talk about something and you're like, whoa, I have no idea what type of question that would be, let me know. I'll try to come up with one for you. Sampling. So it's not going to be a lot on sampling, but I talked about the difference in like snowball sampling versus convenience sampling. And then some types of sampling where we have to try to go a little bit deeper because we're not going to get, people who are drug dealers or something like that who are necessarily going to be, Faith, I said that I would. We're not going to get drug dealers that are going to be willing to come and talk to us. So we're going to have to do different types of sampling. And that is on slide 47 of the quant evidence PowerPoint, okay, which it looks like it was around the 16th or something that I went over. I have it dated when I finished it, but I can't be looking at 18 different things. So, stratified, I might not discuss, but like random sampling, non-probability or purposive samples, snowball sampling, respondent-driven sampling, and cluster sampling. You probably need to know those, okay? There'll probably be 1 or 2, there are going to be at least 1, maybe 2 questions on that. Quantitative design, you go back to that quant evidence slide, okay? I start talking about designs. There may also be a question on, so on slide 6 and 7 of that PowerPoint, when I was telling, like there was a little case about this is what's out there and what type of study would be next. And slide 6 shows the progression of quantitative research. There may be a question on that, possibly. And just have a basic idea of that and you should be fine. The other designs, there are all kinds of listed for you on slide 9. And then, let's see. They're all kind of listed on 9, and then I think it goes through some of them in different places. Yeah, so slide like 32, non-experimental versus experimental, talks about descriptive, case control, and cohort. I talk about correlation. That's on your EBP for stats, or your stats for EBP PowerPoint. I talk about t-tests. Those are all designs, okay? Know those. So I might, Maggie, to help you, I might identify a study, describe it, and say, okay, what's going to be the best type of study design? And it's going to be something like, if I'm doing a study of 16,000 people across the country, like the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, it's going to be really, really hard to do a cohort study on them. I could do a correlational, depending on what I'm looking at. Most likely going to be a cross-sectional, okay? Because I'm cross-secting the population. Those are the kind of things I'm going to ask, okay? Independent versus dependent variables. You're welcome. I'm trying to do it as we go through. Independent versus dependent variables. I put that in all caps. That is going to be on there repeatedly. I guarantee it. Probably 3 questions, at least 2. And please don't get upset if you're there. Well, there's only one. Well, sometimes I forget, but there's probably going to be at least two, maybe three, that you're going to have to tell me whether or not something's the independent or dependent variable, which was why they're on the Kahoots. And it may be straightforward. Most of the time, you're probably going to see it. I'm going to give you a hypothesis, and I'm going to ask you which. Or I'm going to say, in which of the following hypotheses is such and such the independent variable? Probably not going to do that, but I could. It's probably going to be more like, here's the hypothesis. What's the independent variable? Pretty clear cut there. I'm going to give you a hypothesis and ask you, is it directional or non-directional? Is it directional? Is it non-directional and two-tailed? Those are the type of hypotheses. You got to be able to understand hypotheses. So go back to those slides where we talked about that and look over that. And I think in the quantitative PowerPoint, there's multiple slides on hypotheses. I know there are multiple slides on variables, slides 13, 14, 15, and then a little bit on 16. 16 actually gives some good information on correlation that's not on the statistics slides. That'll help you understand that a little bit more too.
Are there any keywords that would help you differentiate between two-tailed or one-tailed?
Well, two-tailed is, remember the dog that was on the slides? And I'm saying that if I'm giving you a clear direction, that's one tail. If I'm telling you that the two things are related, but I'm not telling you which direction, that's two-tailed, because it could go either way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Again, just know the hypotheses, know how to determine if it's directional or non-directional, and know how to determine what the independent and dependent variables are. There will be probably at least 4 questions total on those two things. Statistics for EBP, your levels of measurement. There will probably be at least 2 questions on that. I'm going to give you, data and say, what level of measurement is this? Or something like that. Those will probably be relatively clear cut. Descriptive statistics, frequency, mean, median, mode, range, standard deviation is also on there. I am going to tell you, boy, a lot of people left. I will tell you that there is at least one question where I am giving you, or at least I was trying. I think there's a bell curve with standard deviations. Anyways, the question gives you some numbers. It tells you what the typical standard deviation is. And I'm going to ask you, based on the number that I gave you and based on what the standard deviation is, then what range, which standard deviation, remember there's like 1 standard deviation, 2 standard deviations, 3 standard deviations, and you're talking like your 60 whatever percent, your 95%, and your 99%. So it should be pretty simple to figure out. Remember, like I said, if you guys all get an 80% and the standard deviation is 4, then that's the difference between 76, the range is 76 to 84. So if you fall between a 76 and an 84, then you're within 1 standard deviation. Okay, that's the type of thing I'm going to ask. Parametric versus non-parametric. I told you I don't expect you to know every single non-parametric test. I do expect you to know the parametric ones that I listed, and I do expect you to know chi-square. But chi-square is the only non-parametric test. So if I'm asking you 4 parametric tests and you look at the answers and 3 of the 4 of them are parametric, then the one that you don't know or the one that you know is not a parametric one, then there's your answer. Inferential statistics. Correlation is parametric. Spearman's rank is a correlation that is non-parametric. Okay, so if you see Spearman's rank, it's non-parametric. So if I'm asking you something that's related to parametric, then Spearman's rank cannot be the answer. Know what a paired t-test is. Know what a 2-sample t-test is. All right, 2 samples would be me looking at my section pre and Mrs. Moyer's section pre and my section post and Mrs. Moyer's section's post. If I'm looking at my section pre and post, that is a paired t-test because I'm pairing you. If I'm looking at you separately, then that's a 2 sample because there's 2 samples. All right. Confidence interval, that's that 95% range, right? So there might be a table that has confidence intervals, and I might ask you, does the does the t-value fall within the confidence interval? Well, if it's statistically significant, it better, but you're going to be able to see the t and you're going to be able to see the confidence interval, and does that number fall in between there? That one's pretty simple. The alpha, that's not your p-value. It's close. The alpha is what you set it at, and your p-value has to fall below it, okay? So you're going to see alphas of 0.05, or I may say that it's 0.01. Unless I say it's 0.01, it's 0.05. Clinical versus statistical significance, there's probably only going to be one question on that. I expect you to have kind of a basic understanding of, yes, okay, it may not be statistically significant that, one person dies, but clinically that is a big deal. So as long as you know that basic, you have that basic understanding, you should be okay, but probably only one question on that. Well, the 2 of them compared. Statistical significance, there's probably going to be multiple about, is it statistically significant? Specificity and sensitivity. Know the spin and snout slides. If you know those, you should be able to, do it in your head and say, if it's sensitive and it's negative, it rules it out. All right, that should help you get your answers. Know the examples that I gave you on the slides for the specific tests, which ones are sensitive and which ones aren't, or are specific. I would suggest that you know those. It might be helpful. Qualitative. Guys, I love qualitative. So these questions for you, Maggie, might be a little more creative because I love qualitative and I really want you to know it. You're probably going to get some examples of titles, and I'm going to ask you which is most likely a case study. It's probably going to say case study in it if it is, so I'm probably not going to ask you that one. But I might ask you which one is most likely phenomenology. If you see lived experience, it's phenomenology. If you see grounded theory, it's social processes, it's grounded theory, okay? If I'm talking about an unusual culture or something like that, it's ethnography. Know what type of data that you collect in each of these studies. Phenomenology is generally some type of interview, whether it's a written interview, an oral, an audiovisual, observations. Most of the time, that's how you kind of gather the data for all of those qualitative. But like ethnography, you may also have artifacts, right? We may have stuff from an ethnographic study of the time period of the Titanic. We have bits and pieces of that, so we can piece things together, right? We can piece together the lives of cavemen and women because of things like ethnography and finding those artifacts. So that's an important piece of that. Emic and etic perspective, there's going to be at least one question on there, okay? So if we're talking about a group, if I was talking about college students, you guys would all have an insider perspective of that. If I'm talking, I would have an outsider perspective because even though I'm a professor and I'm with college students a lot, I'm not a college student, so I don't understand that perspective. If I specifically say LGBTQ college students, then depending on the individual that I'm talking about in the question is going to identify, just because you're the LGBTQ director, if you're not an LGBTQ individual, then you're going to have an outsider perspective, okay? So is that person a member of the culture that they're studying? If not, then they're going to have an outsider perspective. Simple as that. Inductive versus deductive. So going from the small story to the overarching or going back the opposite direction, okay? With qualitative, it's inductive. With quantitative, it's deductive, right? We do deduce. When we talk about deducing, we're talking about like detective work. that makes me think numbers and quantitative, that's deductive. Inductive is going the opposite direction, and that's qualitative. What is iterative? Well, that's on your slides for qual, and that means it's a cycle. Constant comparison, it's kind of the same thing. We're reading them, we're coding them, we're looking at what we got in the previous ones and comparing them. So we're constantly comparing the new information that we learned with the old information that we learned. Okay, that's what constant comparison is. Data saturation, that's when we have gotten pretty much all we can get, and the next 50 interviews we do, they're telling us different stories, but they're telling us the same key content. That means you've reached data saturation. We primarily use data saturation with grounded theory, but it can be used with any qualitative approach. When I say on here, it's a little bit further down, what data will you collect for qualitative? Interviews, artifacts, journals, diaries. Do I need to dig deeper to get more information? Those are the types of things you need to be processing. And then what other type of data collection, and I think maybe Jordan asked me, field notes and memos, okay? So field notes and memos for qualitative, especially for phenomenology and grounded theory. Well, actually, for all those three, not so much case studies, but ethnography. Think about the field notes. Like you're setting out and you're like Jane Goodall setting out and she's watching these gorillas. I guarantee you she's either writing things down or she's talking about it, or she might be videoing it and then go back and then she talks about it or writes it down because she's trying to keep everything together in her head and put it down before she loses it. So those are field notes, okay? Memos will help you put together your categories and develop them a little bit better. Thematic patterns of analysis. That's on one of the qualitative slides. That's where you're looking for themes. You're looking for things that stand out. It's on slide 28. It talks about being a very, what I called rich description, and really explaining it in detail, almost like you want a book writer. Like if you read a book, I have to be drawn into it. That's what you want with a thematic pattern. You want it to draw you in. And remember what I said, you have to find meaning in qualitative. You don't force it, okay? You don't come up with categories and then start shoving everything into a category. You let the categories come to you, and then you start seeing if then what you have left fits into those categories, but you don't force them in if they don't fit. Meta summary or meta synthesis, which is qualitative, versus a meta analysis. And the difference is that you're using statistics for a meta analysis. You are not using statistics for a meta summary or a meta synthesis. Those are qualitative. You don't have to know scientific rigor for quant, because that'll be on the next exam, because we just talked about those. But you do need to understand scientific rigor, which are on the last one or two slides of the qual, talking about, it's on the last slide, talking about dependability, credibility, transferability, and confirmability. Okay, and confirmability is member checking and triangulation. So you need to know what those two things are. And then sampling in qualitative research. Well, I think there's a slide or two. I think the slide on qualitative is black, the background of the slide, on sampling and how we generally pick purposeful samples in qualitative because we're looking for specific events. Like we're not going to go do qualitative analysis of everybody. If you haven't experienced that, that's not what we're looking for. So it's a different type of sampling. And remember that we do not determine sample size a priori. I didn't put that on the list. We do not do a priori sampling or sample sizes in qualitative research. We don't determine it ahead of time because we don't know. We don't have to do a power analysis. We don't know how many we're going to need. That's based on data saturation. I think this is a pretty detailed one, much more detailed than you got last time. I'm pretty sure, and I have a few more questions to write because the exam structure from last year, what was on exam, because there were 4 exams and a final last year, so they're a little bit different. So I'm trying to make sure that I've I've gotten what is supposed to be on exam 2 on exam 2. And I'll be using this outline that I gave you to determine what I've covered and what I haven't. So I will do my best to make sure that everything that I put on there, 99% of it is on this list. Now, that's not saying I may not have accidentally forgot about something. And if I covered it, I can test you on it, but most of it is going to be this, okay? Like 99% of it is going to be what is right here in front of you. Does anybody have questions? Please let me know if there's something that you don't understand. We can't do that, Kaylee. We can't do it because of the way that the testing is. If you were in person, I would absolutely be okay with giving you paper, but there's just no way to do it. My response is just going to be hashtag thanks COVID because it's ruining everything.
In our evidence or in our other class days, have us hold up our sheet of paper if we have our desk visible, and they can just like look at it front and back.
What class are they doing this in?
Med surge.
Okay. Let me talk to them. We'll see. I think our junior level meeting is tomorrow, so I'll talk to them. It's a potential if that's something that they've been allowing. I'm not sure, Maggie. We had a big discussion about that. I made a mistake because I didn't realize that we had agreed as a faculty to not do that. They decided to do that in spring, and because I don't teach this level of class in the spring, I didn't probably pay much attention. So that was my mistake that you got backward navigation, but you may still get it. I got to talk to the team because we're trying to be consistent so that you guys know what to expect. We're not trying to make it hard on you. We're trying to maintain the integrity of our tests. And I would love to give you tons of sheets of practice. It just takes time to develop those. Oh, absolutely, Sarah. I argued for it, but I mean, it's just me. Mrs. Moyer is not back, so she can't advocate for you, and it's just me that teaches this right now. So it's one voice with multiple people. So I'll try. I can't guarantee anything. I will still have you. I did advocate for you to have your sound off. You know, if you're sitting there listening to a recording of me, you know, at some point we have to trust that you guys have some integrity and that you're not cheating just because you can. So does anyone else have any questions? I can't give you a lot of details, but I think she was trying to come back at like a part-time, like the doctor I don't think didn't want her working like her full load, because she was still kind of feeling kind of down, but I think she was feeling pretty bad today. So I don't know. So I'm sorry you may be stuck with me for a little while longer. Yeah, I'm going to have to find out about that. When they asked me to cover, EBP, and nobody said anything about 4900. So I will tell her, absolutely. And I will have to find out. If I'm expected to be covering it, then I need to know that. And I need to know, I don't even know when it is. So I hope that's the case, Jordan. But, you know, I've done this for a really long time, and there's a reason why we do things like make you turn your hat around. You can't have anything that you might be able to see through and write on the back of the label, because we've seen people do this ridiculous stuff. And this isn't a math class. It's not a psychology class. You could straight up kill somebody if we graduate you and you still do well enough to pass your NCLEX, but you don't know your stuff because you cheated. And so that's why we're so hard on you guys, because we have to be to keep you safe. It's not to be mean. It's so that when you get out, you know what the heck you're doing. If you're taking care of me or Mrs. Moyer, we sure as heck hope you're not going to kill us. And we like to think that we train our students pretty well. So we hope that's the case. But if anybody has questions, guys, please. So many of your peers just jumped off. Maybe they had things to do. I get that. If I see bad scores on this test, I'm just going to be really frustrated, because I just don't know what else to do to help you. If you don't tell me and I don't know, and people won't come to me, I don't know why people won't come to me. So if, y'all got drama going on in your group message and people are complaining they don't understand something, my response would be to say, hey, absolutely, Maggie, I check my email all day long every day. But if people are griping in the group message, just be like, hey, did you reach out to her? And if they say no, then you need to be like, then shut up. Because for real, I feel like I'm pretty easily approachable. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm going to be glad that you asked me for help and then you rocked this test. Like, I want to see that. I want to feel like I'm teaching you well, but I can't do that if I don't know that you're not doing something well. So I need you to tell me. I want you guys, and Mary, it still makes us feel bad when you guys are not doing well, because then I feel like I'm doing something wrong, but I feel like I'm trying like really, really hard to do well. So yes, I work, I think Friday night till like 3 a.m. So of course, if we're not busy, certain times I check my email. I'm like obsessive with it. So I check it constantly. Here's the thing. Again, with the group message, I have Teams on my phone, on my brand new, pretty Pro Max phone that I paid way too much for. So if you guys send me a message on chat through Teams, it's like sending me a text. Okay. It's going to come straight to my phone. As soon as I get a minute, even if I'm working, if I sit down for a minute to chart something and I see my phone and I see, if I got a minute, otherwise it may have to wait until I get a second, but I will respond to it. If I'm watching TV, I'll respond to it. Okay. So text me in that way. I can't give 120 students my cell phone number. Y'all will be blowing it up all the time, but you can still reach me that way. I will check emails. Okay. Teams might even be a quicker way if you have like a quick question.